lah dia mula memukul adik saya.
Any domestic violence survivors is safe.
Dapat tahu saya sudah dirobohkan.
Kes keganasan rumah tangga direkodkan menerusi talian kasih
Domestic violence is when the partner is physically, sexually, psychologically, or socially abused. The goal of such behavior is to gain power and control over one's partner.
The Women's Aid Organization reported the number of domestic violence for married couples in February was 101 numbers. However, after the movement control orders that has started on 18th of March has increased the number to 159 numbers. At the same time, the Women's Aid Organization has also reported the domestic violence for non-married increased from only 19 numbers in February to 27 numbers in March after the movement control orders has started. There are many causes associated with domestic violence. It can be divided into environmental and individual factors. Those who were brought up in an abusive environment, either witnessing or being victims of abuse, and those who were taught not to respect women or to feel women were inferior has a high potential for committing domestic violence. Individuals with personality disorders, alcohol and drug abuse are also potential. Women who are raised in an abusive environment tend to believe that abuse is a common occurrence in households. Looking at the cause, it can be understood why there can be an increase in cases of domestic violence during movement control order. Abusers are always with the victim and spend a lot of time together, causing the chances for conflict to occur are higher. Social isolation causes no other channel to relieve stress. Financial problems as well as future uncertainties cause significant conflicts. A narrow or unconducive home environment causes drowning when at home.
Women rights. Domestic violence in Malaysia amid COVID-19 with case from some countries. In order to know if the society knows about the domestic violence in Malaysia amid COVID-19, our group have conducted a survey regarding this issue through Google Forms. In order to know if the society is aware of domestic violence in Malaysia, we have conducted a survey with 101 respondents from all ages and gender to observe their opinions regarding this issue. We asked the respondent, do they think that domestic violence is a gender crime? So from the chart we can see that most of them answered yes.
We have also found some respondents' opinion on things that lead to domestic violence. Most of them say that this problem happened because them has experienced neglect and abuse. Other than that, they also believe someone under the influence of drug and alcohol is also the cause of this problem. Another opinion, many respondents also state that domestic violence can occur when a person has lacked attention or respect. Lastly, maybe also because of that person having low self-worth. Here we can see that most respondents know the factors that lead to this problem. Next, based on the survey conducted, 84.2% respondents agreed that COVID-19 has increased the risk of domestic violence. However, some even say no. Based on previous question, many says that COVID-19 has increased the risk of domestic violence. This is because most of the respondents said when people are supposed to be staying at home, it will increase domestic abuse. Even worse, their voice would not be heard. Plus, losing a career, losing financial status can contribute to depression, and this can lead to anger build up, and this causing them to express in other person in the household. Not just that, they also state parents or another family members are under pressure due to financial problems could lead to mental breakdown and loss of hope. survey, we also want to see if the community knows domestic violence is actually a worldwide problem. As can be seen from the chart, almost all respondents are aware that this is a world problem. Last but not least, based on respondent knowledge, most of them said India has the highest domestic violence and followed by Malaysia, Africa and Korea. However, in fact, according to the study, the country with the highest case is South Africa and followed by India. The conclusion that can be drawn is that most people are aware of this issue but may not be very serious, much more about foreign countries.
Okay, for the domestic violence case in Malaysia, we could refer to the case of Ahmad Azhar Othman against Rozana Miswin. In this case, the plaintiff claimed that the defendant had physically abused her at their matrimonial home after accusing the plaintiff for stealing his money. And as for the second, the plaintiff also claimed that the defendant had scolded and hit her in public on her face and her chest after forced her to withdraw all her money from her bank account. And as for the third, the defendant also claimed that the plaintiff had breached the trust which he had entrusted to her with an alleged sum of 500,000 ringgit Malaysia for her personal use and had forced her to sign a few documents. The defendant was charged at the magistrate courts under section 323 and 325 of Penal Code for voluntarily causing severe hurt to the plaintiff with fine of 2,000 ringgit Malaysia. The plaintiff then commenced a civil claim against the defendant, which was approved by the court, and the defendant was ordered to pay 30,000 ringgit Malaysia and 50,000 ringgit Malaysia as general and aggravated damages. The defendant then counterclaimed against the plaintiff for the return of the alleged sum with a total of 100,000 ringgit Malaysia, which then was dismissed by the court. And that's all for the domestic violence case in Malaysia. Thank you.
Next, for the international case of domestic violence, in Orlando, Florida, a woman named Chrissy was a survivor of domestic violence. She claimed that she was being strangled, kicked, held up by the neck and thrown across the room. She had a black eyes, was choked even while she's pregnant. Chrissy frequently thought about leaving, but her children, financial status and fear held her captive. 2020 was a turning point for her, where she finally told a co-worker and began to make an escape plan. Despite being afraid that she might be killed, she mustered a courage to get out from the house. She then took a shelter at Harbour House Shelter. The CEO of the domestic violence shelter, Michelle Sperzel, admitted that the isolation during pandemic made domestic violence more scarier for the victims and more easier for the abusers. No one can notice, no one can see the change in you. You are not going to see the bruises and other marks in your body. Sperzel also stated that they saw the increase during pandemic in case with the lethality risk, which means the use of weapons, threats to kill a partner or children, sexual assault, abuse while pregnant, and strangulation. These cases increased dramatically during pandemic. Sergeant Michael Massicoot, the Assault and Battery Supervisor of the Criminal Investigation Division with the Orlando PD, stated that in 2020, the case of domestic violence had over 2,000 case investigation. 3 of them were homicides. The pandemic had created the extra layer of certainty.
Believe it or not, 1 out of 3 women had been deleteriously harmed by the impact of hypermasculinity, according to research by World Health Organization in 2013. Men who adhere to the belief of hypermasculinity or toxic masculinities believe in the view of benevolent sexism. Benevolent sexism upholds that women are inferior to men in certain fields and traditional tasks such as housekeeping or taking care of their children suit women better. The belief also embraces the view that violence toward women is necessary in order to achieve the respect of their wife, which translates to domestic violence. One of the many solutions to combat domestic violence is through gender equality and empowerment of women, because such measure could minimize the reliance of the wife toward their husband, make them on par with their male counterpart, and ultimately debunk the myth that women are inferior to men. To quote an example, Finland enacted an act on equality between women and men, which goals are to prevent sexual discrimination, promote gender equality, and to improve the status of women in the society. Since 2003, the Finnish government has launched affirmative action covering multiple projects in an attempt to promote gender equality, increase participation of women in the sphere of politics, and ultimately reduce domestic violence among family members. The second solution that I would like to propose, let's move our attention to New Zealand. In many cases of domestic violence, the immediate release of the perpetrators may endanger the victims. A number of jurisdictions have attempted to balance the interests of the accused and those of his victims by allowing bail, but with condition. Therefore, in New Zealand, serious cases like sexual violence or domestic violence requires the prosecutor to convey to the judicial officers upon the release of the perpetrators to the victims.
Solutions of domestic violence, the government should also provide funding for support services towards the domestic abuse victims. As many more women come out to speak out about their abuses, they are also at risk of getting more abusings from their abusers. Unless the government helps the support services to maintain their foundation to help the victim, they won't ever be safe. In the United Kingdom, the government has enacted a new bill named Domestic Abuse Bill and will be enacted starting April 2021. This bill gives a clear path on how they can help the victim of domestic abuse and the children that were involved. During the COVID-19 pandemic, their government announced that they will provide 76 million support packages for those who are really in need. That includes 28 million to help survivors of the abuse and 10 million fund for safe passage for these people. In Malaysia, there are laws about domestic violence in the penal code. An example of a charge for domestic violence is in Section 223 of the Penal Code, punishment for voluntary causing hurt, which carries a punishment of imprisonment for up to 1 year or a fine up to Rm2,000 or both if they are found guilty. Moreover, according to Section 326 subsection A of the Penal Code, anyone who causes hurt to one's spouse or commits an offence under Section 323, 324, 325, 326, 334 or 335 of the Penal Code would be imprisoned for a term up to twice as long as the maximum term of these offences. For example, if a perpetrator is charged under Section 323 of the Penal Code for causing hurt to a spouse, the perpetrator will be imprisoned for up to 2 years instead of 1 year and may be also fined up to Rm2,000.
As we now come to the end, we see that the problem and issues regarding domestic violence is that the wife herself convinced that the husband will change if given enough time and space. In addition, domestic violence is not recognized as a specific crime, and the lack of knowledge regarding the victim's rights also contributes to the increasing number of the domestic violence cases. Even domestic violence cases among unmarried couples is not recognized by the DVA 1994. Instead, the victims can take legal action under the Penal Code against their abusers. Every problem has its own solution. That includes domestic violence. There are several ways we can use to curb this problem, but the ones that have been highlighted is empowering women through gender equality, which includes eliminating toxic masculinity. Next, the family court should change their ways in handling cases that involve domestic violence. And last but not least, improving the criminal justice system and police in order to reduce the probability of these cases to happen. Thus, to emphasize the purpose of the study is to bring awareness of the domestic violence that is happening in our society and open up as many possibilities as possible to help the victims in defending and protecting themselves if such situation arises. Thank you for watching. Assalamualaikum.